the government of Israel provoked Donald Trump to do this, as the government of Israel provokes the United States to be engaged in wars across the Middle East. It is still the Israeli government, by that I mean the Netanyahu-led extremist government. It's the goal of that government to entice the United States into a war with Iran. So when you see the U.S. engaging in military operations in the Middle East, it's at the behest of Israel. My view is that 30 years of being manipulated by Israel, by the Israel lobby, is enough. This is devastating for the United States. We need a foreign policy that is independent, that is America first, if I can put it that way, that is in America's interest. We don't have an interest in this war. We have an interest in negotiating with Iran, which has basically said repeatedly, other than when it's faced directly with U.S. threats, that it's ready to negotiate. When the U.S. Blatantly threatens Iran, they say, well, no, then we can't negotiate. But when there is an opportunity for real negotiation, we could have peace. This is the same as what has happened with Ukraine, with one difference. In Ukraine, the United States was also pursuing a foreign policy not in America's interest. It came from the U.S. deep state. It was promoted by extremists in Ukraine. But Donald Trump found his way to free himself from those shackles. He told the American deep state, step down, I'm president. He told the Ukrainians, we're not doing your bidding. But so far, when it comes to the Middle East and Israel, Donald Trump has continued a 30-year policy of American presidents doing the bidding of the Israel lobby.
Here's somebody who doesn't seem to understand, excuse me, the Houthis, even though he's the current Secretary of State of the United States, cut number 6.
What we can't ignore, and the reason why the president mentioned Iran, is because the Iranians have supported the Houthis. They provided them intelligence, they provided them guidance, they provided them weaponry. I mean, there's no way the Houthis, the Houthis would have the ability to do this kind of thing unless they had support from Iran. And so this was a message to Iran. Don't keep supporting them, because then you will also be responsible for what they are doing in attacking Navy ships, in attacking global shipping.
So when you support another country's military, you're morally responsible. That would acknowledge the moral culpability of the United States for the genocide in Gaza and the slaughter in Ukraine.
And I would say to the Secretary of State, discuss with the Iranians, don't enter into another war. This is straightforward. I met with the leading Iranians many times during the past years, and including the past year, and they are ready to negotiate. In fact, they were pleading with the Biden administration to negotiate. Why didn't it happen? One simple word, Bibi. Because Netanyahu's theory, and he has wrecked Israel and wrecked the Middle East with this theory, is that you go to war, you show your strength, you don't discuss with the counterpart. That's the whole theory of Israel. We must dominate by crushing any opponent, any adversary, any potential negotiating counterpart. Instead, we must kill them. And they got the U.S. into this mode, overthrow regime after regime, topple the Syrian government. Now we have the chaos in Syria after, by the way, 14 years of U.S.-led chaos in Syria that came from Obama's order to the CIA to overthrow the Syrian government, which came from Netanyahu's orders, if I could put it that way, through the Israel lobby to the United States to overthrow the Syrian government. Same with Libya, same with Sudan, now with Yemen. I can also tell you, Judge, that in 2009, I believe it is, could be 2011, I think it's 2009, I went to Yemen at the invitation of the government. I was working, of course, with Secretary General of the UN. I went to look at the economic situation. I came back and said, this is a desperately poor country. It needs attention and it needs help. Yemen wasn't in war at the time. I was laughed away in Washington by these ignoramuses, because that's who we're led by, who said, what do we care about Yemen? What are you talking about, Sachs? Well, your bleeding heart and so forth. They said, no, it's not a bleeding heart. It's very practical. You have impoverishment, you have instability, you have increasing drought, you have displacement. Take care. This is a place of instability. Do some basic things, and then you won't have chaos. Washington, pathetic, ignorant people who don't know how to do anything preventative. And then when there is unrest, then they listen to Israel. Israel doesn't know even the word diplomacy. Israel is kill the opponent.
Here's Mike Walsh sounding like he's reading a transcript written by Netanyahu, cut number 4.
Iran needs to hear him loud and clear. It is completely unacceptable, and it will be stopped. The level of support that they've been providing the Houthis, just like they have Hezbollah, just like they have the militias in Iraq, Hamas and others. The difference here is the Houthis have incredibly sophisticated air defenses, and they also have anti-shipping cruise missiles, drones, sea skimming types of attack drones, and other ballistic missiles even. They've launched dozens of attacks on multiple warships, dozens of attacks, over 175 on global commerce, sank multiple ships. I just think the American people need to understand what has happened here. The previous administration had a series of feckless responses. President Trump is coming in with overwhelming force. We will hold not only the Houthis accountable, but we're going to hold Iran, their backers, accountable as well. And if that means they're targeting ships that they have put in to help, their Iranian trainers, IRGC and others, that intelligence, other things that they have put in to help the Houthis attack the global economy, those targets will be on the table too.
No, and it's also the word you used. It's script. We see narrative. You trot out the Secretary of State. You trot out the National Security Advisor. Is it Saddam? Is it Bashar al-Assad? Is it Muammar Gaddafi? They each play their role. They play their role as villain for some news cycles. This is the U.S. Gearing up for further military action. It's a kind of game, utterly tragic, utterly destructive. Israel promoted. By the way, this is Netanyahu and the Israel lobby. There's every possibility of negotiating with Iran now. This is the most basic point that I want to emphasize. And this was true during the Biden period, which was pathetic, as I've said often, because they couldn't bring themselves to show an inch of light. President Trump has come in saying he's for an American foreign policy, and he's doing it in Ukraine. And I give him credit for doing it in Ukraine, because he's saying, what is America's interest? Well, what is America's interest right now in having an expanded war in the Middle East? None. By the way, we should take note. Netanyahu is ripping Israel apart to shreds right now. It's in a constitutional crisis. It's in a political crisis. It's in a social crisis because of Netanyahu's approach. The headlines today, I was just reading in the Israeli press that this is Israel's Weimar moment. That means when Hitler comes to power. Another one, the ex-Shin Bet chief, who's Shin Bet is the FBI, knows Netanyahu's darkest secrets, and Netanyahu has now fired this man. How Netanyahu's party is officially embracing Europe's far-right extremists, and on and on. He's breaking Israel. To some extent, that's their business, but don't let him break the United States, for heaven's sake.
I was going to ask you, I think he's actually firing the head of Shin Bet on Wednesday, and he announced it yesterday, Sunday, if this would further divide the Israelis. Alistair Crook agrees with you 100%, Professor Sachs, that the division between the religious fanatics and the secular folks is about as wide and deep as it has ever been in modern Israeli history, and Netanyahu is exacerbating it.
Not exacerbating it, leading the breaking apart of Israel. Nothing less than that. This guy has been the political leader in Israel for most of the period since he first became prime minister in 1996. He's a disaster. My point is only an American one. He's a disaster for the United States because our governments let him have vulgar, far too much say, and that continues until today. That's the bombings of Yemen. For God's sake, do we need a geography lesson for America to hear today? The greatest threat in the world is the Houthis. And Iran must, where does this come from? You said it exactly. This is a script, enough script. This is not American foreign policy that makes any sense.